alarm you or throw you off, or throw you off. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and get to it. I normally allow for opening statements, but most people usually elect to waive those opening statements, and I know we got off to a late start here, so let's just jump right into it. And I will say one more thing about this process is that the end of this hearing will not result in a decision by me over the Zoom call. It will be in writing that will follow within 30 days from today's hearing date. So with that being said, let's go ahead and start taking testimony regarding this matter. And so, Mr. Teague Mullen, we'll start with you as the applicant, and I'll ask you, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
I do.
All right, thank you. And I know some people have their screens kind of blacked off or muted. It's up to you whether you want your face to appear on screen or not. It doesn't matter to me. I would ask, though, that you mute your microphone when you're not speaking. Just it will prevent unexpected background noise and so forth. So with that being said, Mr. Mullen, I note that you filed the application on behalf of Bonner Land Company for the riprap as well as a single family dock. And so now is your chance to explain anything that you want to regarding that application.
Yeah, I would say that it's pretty straightforward. You know, I think that it's, I built a lot of docks and put in a lot of riprap, and I don't see anything out of the ordinary. You know, I've worked with the Department of Lands for a number of years, and put in multiple docks, and I don't see how this one is any different than anyone else that puts in docks. So really don't see, you know, I think the objectors have, you know, they're going to state that the navigability of the waterway and the channel, and I went out there actually this morning, and at the end of the dock is 7.5 feet, and it's 7.5 feet for 20 feet past the dock. So when you're talking about, you know, low water, high water, I mean, it's deeper than Sunnyside. So I really don't think that that's a factor, and it shouldn't be an issue. So that's really all I have to say.
All right, thank you. And in terms of the length of your dock, it seemed, and we'll hear from Department of Lands later when it's their turn to talk, but I just looking over, I don't know if you had a chance to look over their hearing statement before the hearing, but they were concerned with the length of the dock. Is there a particular reason that you want it at the length that you've applied for?
I mean, it was something that I talked to Justin about at the beginning, and he said that there's similar docks in the area at that length. I mean, not all the docks are at that length, but, you know, basically it was just a, you know, standard. I mean, a standard dock is typically that long. So, I mean, it was not really one reason or another. I mean, just to maximize moorage for the lot. So.
Okay, so is to maximize moorage, not any other purpose than that? Like, I didn't know if you were trying to accommodate a certain amount of crafts that could dock there or another purpose, but I note in the hearing statement from IDL, it says that it's longer than 9 of the 11 existing docks in the area, and then it's about 18 feet longer than the average dock in the area. Again, was that just to maximize the moorage space, or was there another purpose you were trying to accomplish?
Just to maximize the moorage space.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it's of the average, I guess. But I mean, if you go out, I mean, I guess, where's the circle that you choose from? I mean, do you choose from just that whole slough area, or you choose from out, you know, in front in the main lake? I mean, so I mean, I don't know where that circle is taken from. You know what I mean? Sure.
And you'll get a chance to talk later after we hear from the objectors and the Department of Lands. So I don't want you to think this is your only chance to talk. So if there's something that comes up that you would like to address, you'll get another chance to do so. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Do you have anything else to say at this time, though?
Nope.
Okay. All right.
Oh, I do want to say, I want to add one more thing, that, you know, this dock is 185 feet from the closest dock. So it's 85 feet away from the closest dock. So it's across the way. So it's, I just wanted to point that out.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just making a note of that.
Could we, is this a time that we would object to that statement? That is,
Well, let's go to you now and you can start with that. And so on my screen, that's Susan Wiley. Is
yes.
that you, Miss Wiley? Okay,
Yes, thank you so much.
you're welcome. And Miss Wiley, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
I do, thank you.
All right, thank you. So yeah, go ahead and state your objection to that and anything else you have to say regarding the position you're taking as an objector.
Sure, thank you so much. So thank you for holding the hearing today and for allowing us to share our thoughts about, the and concerns about building on Boyer Slough. So the first thing that I want to say is that my family has been here since I think about 1980, and we have a T dock out front that goes out about 25 feet or so. But the interesting thing, and you'll notice this in both of the exhibits that I submitted, they're actual aerials of the property lines, and they're aerials of the property lines in the shoulder season, which I'll call where it's just a channel, and then in the summer season where the water's up. And you'll notice that the Wiley property line, 662 Whiskey Jack Road, actually cross the channel. So, I mean, our property actually goes out furthest into the channel. And so there's no way that the dock is 185 feet from our property lines. It is feet from the property line. So I'm worried about that. And then I think one of the biggest concerns is that no other dock on Boyer Slough crosses the channel, none. And that is purposeful because we have shoulder seasons, fall and spring, where you have kayakers and canoers that are using the channel to come up, and there's a whole, bird sanctuary back here. And if I am in a kayak and I come to I'm in the channel, I'm going to come to this dock and I'm not going to be able to go any further. I'm going to have to get out, carry my boat around, maybe get back in. So that's a huge concern as well. Also, just want to note, and Trish noted this earlier, that on the application, it said Bonner Slough and it's actually Boyer Slough. So there were some other things like that. And let me pass it over to Trish and then I can come back. So this is Patricia Thurston, who is our neighbor.
Okay. And Patricia Thurston, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
The issue of the length of the dock is questionable because the dock does not need to extend that far out in order to provide adequate moorage. During the summer season, when the water is up, our dock, which is only 22 feet long, we maybe have 4 or 5 feet for our boat, and it's plenty adequate. So there's really no reason for it to extend outward any 60 feet. That does not make good sense. And it also sets a precedence for any other docks that might be proposed along that whole section of Whiskey Jack Cove. And I submitted exhibits, thank you, that showed the elevation of the docks and of the proposed dock. And it appears on that it would well extend into the navigable channel. And we get many boats in here in the summertime. They do not know how shallow this slough is. They have no clue. So they are churning up the bottom as they're going through. Fortunately, most people heed the sign at the beginning of the slough that says no slow, no wake. But every once in a while, we have some other people that are oblivious to that. In fact, last summer, we had a water skier in here. So
That's beside the point, but yeah,
Okay.
the concern is the navigable channel, right? And that the dock would cross the navigable channel, and no other docks do that in the slough.
right, and I noticed from the Idaho Conservation League submitted an opinion about this, and they're concerned, DEQ is also concerned about the amount of phosphorus that has become embedded in the bottom of the slough, all parts of it, and constantly churning it up just contributes to more pollution into Kootenai Bay
Mhm.
and the lake. So that is also a concern. Thank you very much.
And let me ask you, and this is for both you, Ms. Wiley and Ms. Thurston. Are you opposed to any dock, or it's just the specific length of the proposed dock? Like, would you be okay with a shorter dock?
I would, yes.
Yes,
That makes much better sense to me.
we just don't want a dock to cross the navigable channel. And if you look at the property lines, you know, this is one dock application. I understand that there are several more already in the wings across the way and pending. And so if you look at the property lines in low season, which I submitted, and high season, you can see exactly where the property lines are. So Trish and Bob live next door, and their property lines don't go out quite as far, but almost.
Almost to the channel.
Okay.
Can I mention, I mean, all the other docks along that navigable channel are parallel to the shoreline. They do not cross that shoreline, because there are other docks along that navigable channel where the condos are and everything else, but they are generally parallel to the shoreline to prevent the kind of issue that everyone is raising here, which is the loss of the navigable channel and the damage to that year-long stream, which is what creates that navigable channel in the first place.
Okay, and that's Mr. Gross speaking. May I ask how you're connected to the case?
He is
Yeah,
my agent. Yeah, I'm Lana Willingham,
Oh,
and
okay,
that's my son, and he helps me figure
Gotcha.
this out.
okay, all right, that's fine.
Yeah,
And Mr., am I saying your name right? Gross, or is it Gross?
that's correct. Gross.
All right.
Gross. Yep.
And do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today, including what you just said?
I do swear to tell the truth. Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, Ms. Wiley, Ms. Thurston, was there anything else you wanted to say at this point?
No, our neighbor on the left actually is Lana Willingham, and this might be a good time to go to Lana.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right, and Lena Willingham, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
I do, and I promise also not to get angry.
All right. All right, do you have anything to say this time, or do you want?
I do. I'm very concerned because much like the Wileys, this dock that is proposed, at least on their application, shows that the little fingers that come off of the dock actually, according to their own picture, would have pylons underneath those that would go directly into the stream. And I also need to point out that this is a bad actor. This actor has already been fined for not following the rules on the whole development of these 8 lots. And they will continue to want docks on all 8 lots because they're, in order to get maximum value in the sale of these. And I don't trust that the part that the dock begins on the steep shoreline will actually start back there, and they are very, very close if you look at their own plot map to my literal line. And I think at some point we're going to see it within that 10 feet of the literal line. But the most concern I have is when we boat out, we boat directly across the slough in order to minimize the churn on all the vegetation that has populated Boyer Slough. And we follow the channel out because that's the deep part of the lake and the cleanest part of the lake. So to have a dock over that channel or in that channel not only destroys fish habitat, because that's where the fish will spawn, but it also limits my ability to get my boat out to the lake without causing additional pollution. If they would do a dock that is like the condo dock, where it is adjacent to the shoreline and does not cross that we wouldn't have any, I mean, other than stirring up the soil. And this is a group that, as they developed this, never got a permit to cut down all the trees. I have no reason to believe that they will follow any rules, because it's cheaper to do what you want and then pay a fine later on for not having done what should have been done. So as they put these pylons into the bed, I think it has to really be watched how close they get to the littoral line, and whether or not the pylons are being driven into this stream bed, causing problems for both navigation and for, and you know, this stream isn't just used during, I mean, we've ice fished in that stream during the winter, and we would like to continue to see navigation be an important part of this decision. This lot is not very big. None of these lots are, and most of it is steep down to the water. And where they begin the dock and where they put lawn is going to be a concern for the phosphorus and the arsenic and the pollutants that are in this stream. And we don't want to have more algae blooms like we had a year ago. Because over 1/3 of that lot is downhill and probably not buildable. So I'm concerned that someone follow this project, no matter what kind of dock is finally approved, to make sure that they do follow the rules this time and don't behave as they did in cutting down all the vegetation. At that point, pollution occurred into Boyer Slough, and I took pictures and documented that, and that's how they ended up with the fine.
And same question that I asked Ms. Wiley and Ms. Thurston. Are you okay with a shorter dock, or are you opposed to any dock?
I'm okay with a dock that parallels the shoreline on their side, and that does not extend into the navigable stream. It is the only navigable stream. It starts the other side of Highway 200, and there should not be pylons or docking above that navigable stream.
And I would actually agree with Lana's statement there, that no dock that would come out from that property would not come into the navigable channel or stream, as Lana describes. So a parallel dock like the Whiskey Jack condos did would be fine.
Yes, and I agree with Lana also. And thank you again for having us here and listening to us. We appreciate this a lot. And during the period that all the clearing of the land took place, yes, it went right down to the high water mark, and it should not have done that.
Yep.
So we thank you again for listening.
Yeah, this is Dustin Gross. Can I say just a couple other things as well?
Yes.
In support of this, which is, I think the other thing just to bear in mind is that these are professional developers that we're talking about. Teague is a real estate professional and developer. He's not the long-term owner of the property, and what they're trying to do on one lot will set the precedent for the other 7 that they're trying to also sell. So it's important that we get this figured out, I think, in the beginning, because the damage could be 8x if we get it wrong here at the start. And I think we're all very concerned about, just protecting the environment and the natural resources we've all been using. And that side, of the slough, of the bay there, has been the natural, beautiful part. And it is the deepest part, that is correct. And it's deepest because of the fact that there's this year-round stream that keeps it fed. But it's also the most, I think, ecologically sensitive part for that reason. And that's what I think we're all very concerned about, is making sure the ecology of that is protected, the navigability, year-round use of that stream is protected. And we're certain there are ways to develop it to be sensitive to that. We're just extremely concerned when we hear Teague or other people saying, oh, well, the precedent should be the way it is for the rest of the lake, or maybe we shouldn't worry about other things. That slough is a very unique ecosystem, and it's protected, and that's where some of the best fishing, a lot of the top catches that occur on the lake in terms of just trout and other fish, that like every year come from that slough. It's got, we've got a nest there where we have all kinds of birds, and eagles fly through there, and it's a very, very unique environment. And what I think, again, concerns all of us is these developers don't seem to care about that. They haven't demonstrated care, concern, and even in the discussion opening this thing up, I shake my head thinking, wow, these guys really don't understand how sensitive this little area is. It's not like the rest of the lake. It's a protected environment where there's a lot of activity, a lot of fish. There's a year-round stream. And there's osprey that nests just above all these lots, in a protected area. This is something we have to protect because there aren't many places like this on the lake. It's not like the rest of the big lake that's out there. It's a very unique environment.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gross.
Yep.
All right, Mr. Willingham, was there anything else you wanted to say at this time?
I guess the only other thing that I want to emphasize is that osprey nest that's directly across, fishes, eats the fish out of the slough, and anything, and I can't see with this kind of how that wouldn't impact, particularly when you add 7 more docks in as they go dock, lot by lot, adding all the docks, that it isn't going to. We have moose, we have deer, we have beavers, all of that is going to be impacted if you stick 60 feet docks out across these 100-foot shoreline lots on every one of these. So I reemphasize, that this is a wonderful area, but it is also a very polluted area, and we need to ensure that we don't do anything to further the pollution, and that we still recognize that wildlife have a right to be too. So
I'll just add that in one of my first conversations with a fellow Mike, he worked for Mike, but he moved back to Nebraska. Justin.
Echelon.
Yeah, he was Justin Echelon. He was great. In reviewing the actual law with him, he said, so Sue, yes, it doesn't look like there are any regulations against not doing this, but there is a clause that says that, you must be reasonable or sensible to the situation, so we all ask that you come and look at the situation and look at the navigable channel and see how they, took down every tree across the way, not giving that, 65 or 40 feet of vegetation to the water that you're supposed to do. And so we ask that you come and look at it so that, you're clear in making a decision that is good for the property and good for the land.
I would just like to reiterate that a 60-foot dock is not necessary. A shorter dock adjacent to the shoreline would be more than adequate for what boat might be moored in that area. And looking at the depth of the water in high water times, if you look at my exhibit, you will see that it does not need to be that long.
Okay, thank you. And I mentioned this now, I should have mentioned it earlier, is that anyone that submitted a written exhibit, that is part of the record, that is part of the official evidence of this case. And I do look that over when I'm writing the decision. So thank you all for submitting the exhibits, and that is admitted as part of evidence in this case. So just wanted to clarify that. So all right, so we've gotten through the objectors. So let's turn it over to the Idaho Department of Lands and Mr. Amer. Ms. Kaufman, I didn't know if you wanted to say anything before we hear from Mr. Amer, but now's your chance to do so. Yeah.
Sorry,
That's okay.
I will defer to Mr. Amer. I may have a little bit of a follow-up point about the line of navigability, but I'll just wait and see how Mike addresses that, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine. All right, Mr. Amer, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
Yes, sir, I do.
All right, go ahead and begin when you're ready.
As is customary, Mr. Hearing Officer, I will skip over certain sections of my prepared statement. Since it's already part of the record, it's not necessarily a need to read the entire statement in its entirety. As I finish up my statement, I also have some notes I've been taking today that I'd like to address the group as well. Good morning. My name is Mike Amer. I am the Lands Resource Supervisor for the MICA Supervisory Area Office of the Idaho Department of Lands. My purpose in being here today is to provide you with information regarding IDL's assessment of application for encroachment permit L96S2772 filed by Teague Mullen of the Bonner Land Company, which owns property identified as RP 034240000080A in Sandpoint, Idaho. Applicant is seeking an encroachment permit for a single-family dock and riprap located adjacent to a vacant parcel in Boyer Slough, Lake Ponderay. This parcel is described as parcel ID RP 034240000080A, Lot 8, First Edition of the Cove at Whiskey Jack. The proposed single-family dock would consist of a 6x32 approach and 30x28 single slip fixed pier comprising 696 square feet. I'd like to also add onto this that the applicant is also seeking riprap for their shoreline. I'll skip over the timeline as well as the legal provisions that we reviewed when looking at this application and skip to the conclusion. Littoral ownership, the applicant owns a vacant property, as mentioned before, on Boyer Slough, Lake Ponderay, Lot 8, First Edition of Cove at Whiskey Jack. Applicant is seeking an encroachment permit for a single-family dock and riprap. The application type would be considered both a navigational for the dock and a non-navigational for the riprap encroachment. Applicant owns approximately 100 feet of water frontage, which is sufficient water frontage for a single-family dock navigational encroachment per IDAPA rules. IDAPA provides that a single-family dock may not exceed 700 square feet of total surface decking area, waterward of the ordinary or artificial high water mark. The applicant's proposed dock would be 696 square feet in size. The proposed single-family dock would extend outward into the lake 60 feet. The proposed dock is longer than most of the docks in the slough. Based on aerial imagery review, there appear to be 11 existing docks within Boyer Slough with an average length of 42 feet. There appears to be a dock that is 60 foot and another dock in excess of 65 feet. None of the existing docks in the slough extend into the winter channel of the slough. The Whiskey Jack community dock was counted as just one dock, even though it's a dock system. However, when calculating for the average dock length in the slough, the longest portion, which was 50 feet, was used. The community dock is also 30 feet in length, where Boyer Slough makes a sharp curve and the winter channel begins hugging the southern shoreline of the slough. IDAPA provides a rebuttal presumption that a single-family dock will have an adverse effect upon adjacent littoral rights if it is located closer than 10 feet from adjacent littoral right lines. The proposed dock appears to provide a 20-foot buffer to the east and a 50-foot buffer to the west, which meets and exceeds the minimum requirement by IDAPA. He's also been determined to be a littoral owner. In conclusion, applicant is applying for both the single-family dock, which is processed under Idaho Code 58-1305, and riprap, which is processed under Idaho Code 58-1306 encroachments, which have different processing requirements, different timelines, and different hearing types. IDL processed the application primarily as a 58-1306 application so that local resource agencies and the public could be made aware of the riprap portion of the project. Adjacent neighbor notices were also sent for both the single-family dock and riprap. Most of the comments, concerns, and objections received were in regard to the single-family dock. There was one comment letter discussing the riprap portion of the project, recommending denial. Due to the fact that the objections were raised about the single-family dock, IDL decided to have a contested case hearing. I will discuss IDL's conclusion of the proposed single-family dock and riprap project separately. For the riprap, although Boyer Slough is naturally protected by waves from both boats and weather, the water level still fluctuates wildly throughout the year. The water level rises 11.5 feet in the late spring, is held steady all summer long from June to September, and then drops 11.5 feet in the fall. It is fairly common to have erosion with that 11.5 foot elevation change, regardless of wave activity. Riprap is a very common application received by IDL in our 3 Northern Idaho area offices. It appears that 3 other parcels in the slough have riprap. 1 parcel has a seawall, and 1 parcel incurred a landslide that pushed a lot of dirt material into the slough. There is riprap on a parcel right next door to lot 8 to protect a pump house, and there was also visible erosion on the bank during my November 21st, 2022 inspection. The proposed riprap meets the standards set forth in IDAPA. IDL did not receive any comments from IDEQ in regard to water quality issues related to the riprap. Idaho Department of Fish and Game did not comment on the riprap. IDL observed erosion on the bank along the southern shoreline of Boyer Slough, and IDL recommends approval of the riprap portion of the application. IDL, this is in addition to my hearing statement, IDL would like the applicant to submit a revised drawing that better reflects the actual height of the riprap on the bank. During my site inspection, I observed that it is a very steep bank that goes from the property down to the winter channel. And it's unclear on their application if they intend to riprap that entire bank all the way down to that winter channel, or if it's halfway down that bank, or if the riprap would occur just where the vegetation is being eroded. I saw some what we call caving taking place, where underneath the vegetation, there's some erosion occurring. And so I would assume that the riprap would take place at the top of the bank, but I just would like clarification on that matter. For the single family dock, the dock drawings that were submitted by applicants appear to meet the following single family dock standards that are listed under IDAPA. The proposed dock is less than 700 square feet in size. No portion of the dock is wider than 10 feet. The proposed dock drawing also shows at least a 10-foot buffer between the dock and the adjacent littoral lines. The revised proposed piling plan for the dock appears to show that the piling will not block the winter channel of Boyer Slough, and therefore would not restrict public access in the non-summer months. Due to extremely shallow conditions in the slough channel in the non-summer months, it would appear that only paddlecraft would be able to navigate the channel. Paddlecraft would be able to navigate the channel and pass under the dock if the piling were not located within the channel. Additionally, there should be no issue for fish spawning if the pilings are not located in the channel. Based on the comments received from adjacent neighbors in the slough, the crux of the issue appears to be the length of the dock. As mentioned above, the proposed dock appears to be longer than 9 of the 11 existing docks in the slough. It also appears to be 18 feet longer than the average dock in the slough. The proposed dock will also be the only dock that extends out past or into the winter channel of Boyer Slough. IDL received concerns about water quality from IDEQ that if the proposed dock is approved, boat traffic would be pushed to the shallower portion and sediments would be churned up by boat props. This could release phosphorus back into the water column, adding to an already existing water quality problem in Boyer Slough. IDL acknowledges that there are 3 other pending applications in the same location, with the potential for 8 total single-family docks in this area. However, each application is processed individually, and each application is approved or denied on a case-by-case basis. Site-specific conditions, such as water depth along the shoreline, and how much shore exists between the artificial high water mark and the Winter Creek Channel. This hearing is only for Lot 8, and IDL will only be addressing dock concerns as they relate to Lot 8. Following my site inspection in late November, I observed that Lot 8 has a steep bank that leads from the artificial high water mark down to the Winter Creek channel. Based on the 11.5-foot fluctuation in water levels, combined with the steep bank, I estimate that a dock that extends just to the edge of the Winter Creek channel would have a depth of almost 11 feet. I also observed that the northern side of Boyer Slough, on the north side of the Winter Creek channel, was relatively flat. The deepest part of Boyer Slough is in the middle of the Winter Creek channel. Any docks that are located within a channel or beyond the channel would require all public boat traffic to be pushed to the middle portion of Boyer Slough, which is shallow and weedy. Historically, IDL has tried to provide at least 4 foot of depth for moorage of boats adjacent to a single-family dock. Additionally, IDL has restricted the length and size of single-family docks located in narrow sloughs or inlets so as to not block or restrict access. Just because a single-family dock can be up to 700 square feet in size does not mean that it has to be allowed. IDL believes that a dock could be designed for Lot 8 that would provide sufficient depth or moorage of a boat while not blocking the deepest part of Boyer Slough and without constricting access during the non-summer months. A dock that remains close to shore would be beneficial for the public, for the waterfront neighbors upstream of Lot 8, and for water quality. Based on the application provided, IDL's evaluation of the application in light of LPA and IDAPA, correspondence with IDEQ and IDFG, as well as my site inspection, IDL recommends denial of the proposed single-family dock because the dock exceeds the line of navigability for Boyer Slough. That concludes my statements. I'd like now, Mr. Hearing Officer, to read a couple of notes that I took on this matter. I just want to point out that I did visited the site last week, and I walked the entirety of the slough. I parked up on Whiskey Jack Road and walked down into the site. I observed Lot 8 as well as the rest of the lots for this project. In my experience with what I saw was that it was very shallow. It was only a few inches deep. There were comments today about a lot of paddling and ice fishing. It was frozen over in parts when I was there, and I just wonder how much activity that water body actually sees in the non-summer months. Also, there was a comment about lawns up to the water's edge. Just want to point out that the lawns are above the artificial high water mark, and therefore lawns or any vegetation that they plant on their lot is outside of our jurisdiction. Also wanted to point out that, as I did in my statement, and I apologize if some of the people online didn't check the record, but the applicant did submit a revised drawing that showed the piling location for the dock, and they showed that the piling location would not be within the channel. There would be a piling on either side of the channel, so there wouldn't be a piling in there. And then lastly, or not lastly, but another comment had to do with the setbacks and how far out they're going and how close they're getting. The 10-foot setback that IDL monitors and regulates has historically been with your left and right neighbor. We've never historically enforced a 10-foot setback from the lakeward side of someone's private submerged lines. The intent of the setback was to not restrict navigation from your neighbor. You would never want to put your dock right on the property line, because then that might mean your neighbor can't get out of their dock. So you have to provide at least a 10-foot buffer to allow for that navigation. With the docks across the channel, if the proposed dock was within 10 foot of that private submerged line, I do not see that affecting the navigability of the dock on the other side of that channel. IDFG, Idaho Fish and Game, their initial response on this project was no comment. When they were emailed by somebody else about this project, and I was discussing it with Fish and Game did mention it'd be nice if piling were not on the channel, but there was never any mention by Fish and Game of fish habitat or fish spawning in this area. I'm not a local. It's not to say that fish aren't in this area, but in 2 different communications with Fish and Game, they never mentioned anything about fish habitat or fish spawning. The one comment they did make was it'd be nice if piling weren't in the channel. And then another note was that IDL believes that this application is unusual in that it's in a narrow, shallow slough, and that there already is phosphorus concerns with water quality in this slough, and that there are no docks on this side of the slough. And historically, no docks have ever crossed the winter channel. So as the applicant making a comment that this is a pretty fairly common situation, I just feel like those are unique components that IDL had to look at when processing its application. If you were to measure from the applicant's artificial high water mark out to the end of the winter channel to where it's deepest. I measured about 50 feet. From that point all the way to the Wilmingham's side of the shoreline is 240 feet. What that tells me is that on the applicant side of the shoreline, it only takes 50 feet of horizontal distance to get to maximum depth, while on the other side of the channel it takes 240 lineal feet to obtain that depth. It was just a very gradual slope on the north side of the channel during my site visit. When I was walking around on the lake bed, that northern side really resembled a plateau. It was difficult to even discern the gradient up to the shoreline, but you know that there has to be some rise in elevation to get to that next shoreline, but it's definitely a very gradual situation. And I believe that is all that I have, unless there's anything else from you, Mr. Hearing Officer, or anybody else online.
I just wanted to ask Mr. Amer that IDL's position is that a shorter dock would work. Do you share the view with the objectors that the dock should be parallel to the shore, or is it just a shorter length going out?
Mr. Hearing Officer, I share that this dock is too long. Proposed dock is too long. Whether it be a boardwalk style dock or a dock that goes out, I think that's going to be very site specific. I know we're only talking about lot 8, but I just want to mention, I think that's going to be very specific to each individual lots. There were a couple of lots that I visited that had a very shallow shoreline that kind of resembled more of the stuff on the north side of the channel. For this location, it is very steep. And to me, it looks like there could be about 30 feet or so from the artificial high water mark out to the creek channel. Because the bank is so steep, it's very difficult to get that measurement. Definitely not a one-person job. You need some little bit of survey equipment to kind of figure out how far that dock could go. But I believe that a dock could be designed for that area that would not block the channel and that would provide sufficient depth. I do not believe that the applicant needs to go 60 feet out in order to get to the depth that's needed to moor a boat in that slough. Whether that is a boardwalk dock or maybe just a shallower dock. The docks on the Whiskey Jack community where Boyer Slough makes the curve and it's pretty pinch point. Those docks are a boardwalk style dock, but at the same time, they have fingers that stick out that create a slip. So I don't know if you'd consider that a boardwalk dock or a slip dock. So I'm not in the dock design business, but I do know that 60 feet is 18 feet longer than the average and that it would be blocking that winter channel.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Amer. Ms. Kaufman, did you have anything to add?
Mr. Hearing Officer, thank you so much. No, I don't have anything to add to what Mr. Amer has said. I do note, and I don't know if you've been able to see the chat, but Jennifer Ekstrom with the Idaho Conservation League has asked if she could speak as well. So I just wanted to make sure that you saw that.
I did not see that, so thank you for letting me know. And yes, of course, we'll welcome her comments. Let's go ahead and get those now. Ms. Ekstrom, do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth today?
Yes, I do.
And so go ahead and say what you would like to say at this time.
Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to comment. I would like to thank the Idaho Department of Lands for your recommendation to deny the currently proposed dock in Boyer Slough and for considering its contribution to water quality concerns, as it would certainly increase phosphorus loading in the slough. I also wanted to thank Idaho Department of Land staff for the proactive work to survey the situation in person and to engage with other agencies like the Department of Environmental Quality and the Department of Fish and Game while formulating this recommendation. As mentioned in those communications with Chantilly Higbee of Idaho Department of Environmental Quality, Boyer Slough is, quote, in really bad shape, end quote. Due to a sewage treatment plant that is not meeting its permit limits for pollution, including phosphorus, along with other phosphorus inputs, this slough has problems with toxic algae blooms and invasive weeds and is not meeting its beneficial uses under the Clean Water Act. According to the Idaho Conservation League's own water quality monitoring data from this summer, phosphorus concentration was as high as 2,400 micrograms per liter in comparison to the targeted 9 micrograms per liter per the Lake Pend Oreille Nearshore Total Maximum Daily Load Cleanup Plan, which Idaho Department of Lands participated in the creation of. We are now working with Idaho Department of Environmental Quality and community partners to develop a total maximum daily load specific to Boyer Slough because the problems are so concerning there. And according to the implementation section of the Nearshore Total Maximum Daily Load, Idaho Department of Lands has a shared responsibility to educate the community about activities that increase pollution in our waterways. From this perspective of shared responsibility, I ask that you reconsider your position on the riprap. There are other methods of stabilizing the shoreline, like restoration of the native vegetation, which was cleared away, which would provide the additional benefit of filtering the water that runs off of disturbed soils and lawns from this proposed new development. So thanks again for the opportunity to comment and for your recommendation to deny the proposed dock.
And I just had a question regarding the riprap. You mentioned restoration. Is that moving in more dirt to make it less steep and less caving with the steepness of it? Or could you go into a little more depth of what that would involve if they do not use riprap?
That would be a process of replanting native vegetation. I am not the expert on that. I could certainly put the applicant and Idaho Department of Lands in contact with experts on how to restore native vegetation, but it would be planting, you know, grasses and willows and things like that.
Okay. No, that answers. Thank you. Was there anything else you wanted to say?
No, I really appreciate the opportunity to comment.
You're welcome. All right, and so while we're on that, I don't know if Merritt Horseman is on the line from Idaho Department of Fish and Game, or anyone else from IDFG is on the line. If so, would you like to say anything at this time? Don't see anyone. What about Chantilly Higby from the Idaho Department of Environmental Quality? Nope. And then we also had a Chris Aiken who was noticed for this hearing. I don't see Chris Aiken on the line, but just wanted to give him a chance as well. No, okay. We're going to go back to Mr. Mullen in just a second, but is there anyone else on the line from an agency or private citizen that would like to make a comment at this point?
I would like to make a comment about the Kootenai Pend Oreille Sewer District. I've been associated with that sewer district in the past. My husband has served on that sewer district board for well over 30 years. And the sewer district has always been able to have their discharge permit approved. And they within the last several years, they developed a land application site, which takes water from the treatment facility instead of discharging it into the slough. And they have been very proactive in dealing with environmental concerns. So I would just like to say that they are not inefficient. They work very hard at what they do, and they have a strong commitment to our community. So I am a little concerned that there was a comment that reflected on the sewer district in a negative light.
Okay, thank you.
And I guess I'll just add at this point that the property across the way is not part of the sewer district. Is that correct?
No,
It is? Oh, wow. Okay. My mistake. So
yeah, no, they are.
That's okay. All right, Mr. Mullen, let's go back to you. I know you've been very patient listening to a lot of different commentary regarding the objection to your application. You don't have to say anything else, but I wanted to come back to you and give you a chance to address any of the issues that were brought up in case you do. Do you have anything further to say?
Well, yeah, I'd like to thank everyone for, your concerns and, obviously, you know, when people see growth happen in their backyard, it's never easy to see. You know, I would like to say that I do care about the environment. I do care about, you know, what happens to the lake, the fish, you know, everything else. And I'm not just a developer that's just trying to make a dollar. I develop and I do it in a way that is responsible. You know, I did get a fine for the EPA, but I only got a fine because the neighbors called on me. And when they came out to look at it, they said, everything you're doing is perfect. You have proper erosion control. I revegetated the whole property, so it's reseeded with natural vegetation that is within the guidelines of Bonner County. So for you to say that I just tore it apart and didn't reseed it, didn't revegetate it, is not true. So, and that being said, you know, as far as the riprap, you know, there is willows, there is vegetation, and the erosion is still happening. So I just want you to be aware that, you know, it's the whole site has been revegetated and been signed off by the EPA, the DEQ, and Bonner County. As far as the dock goes, you know, the concerns that I talked with Justin about was basically not having piles in the river channel. And so I adjusted the dock to, you know, put the piles outside of the river channel. So when the water is down, you still could get canoes, kayaks, and everything through there. Not to say that anyone, you know, like I said before, it's really shallow. It's probably like 3 or 4 inches. So it would be pretty tough to do. Also, at the mouth where the erosion happened, where there was a slide that came in where, you know, that turns back into that corner, you know, that created a really shallow part of this whole Boyer Slough. So the activity that happens in the wintertime, I would, you know, question, but, you know, I've never seen anyone down there, but, and I actually lived in Boyer Slough for 2 years and traveled my boat on a regular all summer long through Boyer Slough, and the water depth is better in that channel than it is in most of the little channels that we see. So I've lived in, I built a dock in Sundowner Bay, basically, and the whole channel is 4 feet. So the end of the dock in this channel is, you know, 7.5 feet. So I don't know why it would be a concern of navigation when you have sufficient depths that are at the end of this dock. I also lived in, you know, Comeback Bay in a little slough where I only had 4.5 feet of depth in that dock or in that slough. So I'm aware of the concerns, but I'm not seeing a concern in this area other than that there's weeds. And, you know, I think that you guys have a committee that's put together to treat the weeds, but nowhere in that slough are you going to hit your prop on the lake bed.
That is incorrect.
Well, not anywhere close to the dock that I'm proposing.
And Ms.
many-
Wiley, you said that was incorrect. In what way is it incorrect?
That the slough is very shallow. You know, the only navigable part is the channel. And we weren't referencing earlier winter season, we were referencing shoulder seasons. So in the fall and the spring, the slough is used a lot by kayakers and canoers and birders and fisher people. And so, you know, having a dock sit in the middle of the channel or impede the channel is not a good thing for anybody.
And this is Lana Willingham, to take what is now the lowest part of the season and apply that to the spring, when the flow is more, isn't a reasonable representation of what the channel looks like at different times. I can't tell you the number of fisher people we have who come in before the water level even gets up to the 11.5 feet. It is the place where people come to do a lot of fishing. The other thing I would want to comment on is, yeah, they did finally mitigate, but it was after we went to the Department of Planning over and over again, to lands, to every agency we could think of, as they took out the vegetation without permits, without recognition that they should not have taken the vegetation from 40 feet from the water ever out. And to say, okay, we got a fine, and yeah, we went back and mitigated because they made us, is not the same as saying we did it the right way with a permit. We left 40 feet of vegetation along the shoreline, and we noticed all the neighbors instead of just arriving and us all watching everything come down, and all the seepage into Boyer Slough from the poor planning on their part and the inability to involve the proper agencies.
Okay. All right, thank you. Well, let's go back to Mr. Mullet. We kind of went away from you for a minute. Was there anything else you wanted to address?
You know, I want to reiterate that, you know, it's 7.5 feet deep. And so even when the water is down 2 feet or 3 feet, there's plenty of water depth to get a boat in there. So, and part of it is, you know, where the landslide is stops you from doing that anyway, because I think it's only 5 feet deep, you know, where the landslide happened. But anyway, that's all I have.
All right, Mr. Amer, let's go back to you. Was there any other thoughts you had regarding the different commentary we've heard? Anything that you wanted to address before we conclude?
Mr. Hearing Officer, thank you. Just want to let you know, Angela Kaufman had to step out to another meeting she had.
Okay.
So she's off the line.
Okay.
As far as your question, Mr. Hearing Officer, I don't think I have anything else to add.
Okay.
Can I ask you a question, Mike?
Yes.
So Mike, if I went 40 feet out, you know, do you think that there's the potential that it would be permitted as long as the piles were outside of the winter channel?
I would imagine yes. I would imagine the answer to that would be yes. My analysis shows the average dock length in that slough is 42 feet. I don't know if you would get into the channel. I think that if you were able to design a dock that did not have piling in the channel and would allow boat access through, I think that would alleviate all the concerns that were raised today. I think it would be important. I think it'd be important to note how much vertical path there would be for folks to be able to travel between your dock and that. I think that
it would just, you know, I measured it, and I think that we could probably go, you know, like 40, 42 feet, and then the piles would be outside of the winter channel, and you know, and it could work that way. I mean, the only concern I have, especially when we go to these other lots, if we do a side tie, that, you know, the boats are going to be parked in that channel anyway. So I don't really know how that's going to make a big difference. But I mean, we can design, you know, 40 feet on all these lots and try to stay out of the channel.
As you asked, and as I said, I think a dock that would go 40 feet out and would avoid the channel, I would imagine that Department of Lands would not recommend denial in that case. Because again, the channel would not be restricted or blocked, and you would be within the line of navigability. So, and you would also be pulled in 20 feet, which would then allow that 20 feet to be used for boater traffic, which some of the concerns are raised. So I think that dock design would check all the boxes. One thing I would ask you is that as you develop these additional lots, I do not think that there needs to be one exact dock that would fit all 8 lots. I think that there are lots that are different, like lots 4, 5 and 6. I think 1 and 8 are the steepest. So I don't think the same dock design will fit and needs to fit every single of the 8 lots.
Can I ask a question on the docks? Are you saying that the docks can go beyond the literal lines so they can be on Bev Wiley's property instead of?
No. First, let me backtrack and just say kind of just a boilerplate statement, but I do need to put that out there. IDL cannot pre-approve or pre-deny anything. We would need to see the drawing. We would need to see the design. I would never approve anything just based on a verbal discussion. But to your question, Ms. Laningham, there are 2 things that we have to look at when we evaluate docks on the Pend Oreille region. That is the littoral lines that protrude from shoreline. And as I mentioned before, we want to make sure that people are not encroaching into their neighbor's area to impede their ability to navigate. The other thing we need to look at in Pend Oreille is what we call private submerged lines. And so when people design a dock in Pend Oreille, they need to make sure that their dock fits within the littoral setbacks as well as in their private submerged land. And if they were to design a dock that would cross over their private submerged land and go into someone else's private submerged land, they would be required to get that person's signature and their approval to go into that private submerged land. In the past 5 years or so, there's been a huge push with Pend Oreille folk about abiding by those private submerged lines and not letting any dock go over it. And there's been a handful of cases where we've had to try to position docks that fit within both lines. But to answer your question, if the developer were to propose a dock that would cross over into someone else's private submerged, they would need to obtain their sign off first.
Well, and that lot 6, obviously with the littoral line going across the stream bed, that would then require the Wiley's acceptance of a dock into their own if he's going to go out 40 feet on every one. And then my final, I guess, question is, are you saying too that the docks need to be high enough that I can get my boat under the dock so that I can still follow the area that has the least weeds in it? Because, you know, when you get into my dock and to the middle portion, it's as shallow as 4.5 feet, even when it's at summer pool. So you're constantly stirring up all the plant that is there and causing problems for your propeller if you don't follow the channel.
I recognize that. I think all you folks on the North Shore, at some point, you do have to cross over. Prior to this development, you could ride in that channel, but at some point you have to cross over.
And we have cleared weeds from the crossover path that we try to follow from that deeper part and the less weedy. And we literally have had the whole grandkids out there pulling weeds to keep the prop from being fouled as it comes in.
You know, one thing I would note is that Chantilly from IDEQ made a comment about dredging in the channel. I feel that IDL would entertain applications from Boyer Slough residents to dredge the channel from the deep channel to your properties if that were to improve water quality. Because regardless of the developer's plans, at some point, all of the folks on the north side of the shore need to cross through that shallow area. And that is the sediments that are getting stirred are not going to be stirred necessarily because of the applicant's docks. It's because you have to go through that distance of that shallowness. And if dredging were to occur in the dry and dredging were to occur in such a way that Fish and Game and DEQ had no denials or objections to it and were recommending it, I do not see why IDL would not get behind that as well to approve such an application. But one thing again, I think that we do need to recognize that this application is for lot 8 only. And we're talking about lot 6, we're talking about other things in this area. I think it's wise to have these discussions because there's going to be development, there's going to be further applications. And it would be great if everybody could be on the same page and we don't have a hearing for all 8 applications. But we do need to make sure we focus on lot 8 and what the application is for. But I would encourage Department of Lands and the folks on this line, including the applicant, to have further discussions with the other applications. Our IDAPA rules allow for us to have these discussions and have us serve as the mediator to try to resolve conflicts. And I think that there might be a way to avoid potential hearings in the future if we might be able to organize a meeting between everybody for the future applications.
All right, and Mr. Mullen, you had asked a question of Mr. Amer a minute ago. Did you have a follow-up question for him or anything else that you wanted to address before we conclude?
Yeah, I just wanted to make it clear that it sounds like, you know, the dock would not be denied if I was 40 feet out. So that's all I wanted to state.
I don't believe I got the answer to my question about whether height, so a boat would go under the dock, would be taken into account.
I guess, you know, it's a good, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your question, Ms. Wilmingham. I guess I'm confused with your question. When I was referring to height, I was talking about in the non-summer months, mainly paddlecraft. People that wanted to canoe and kayak or very small fishing craft. In my opinion, only small craft or paddlecraft would be able to navigate the non-summer month channel, whether we call it a winter channel or non-summer channel. So I would like to see that paddlecraft, like a kayaker, could still go underneath the dock. As far as your boat, I don't see how your boat would go underneath there. If there was just a channel, there's no way that you'd be able to navigate to your dock from that channel. You'd be crossing dry river lake bed. When the water is up, then I don't see why you'd be going under the dock, because the dock will be at water level.
So for me to continue to use the navigable channel, they would have to do docks like the condo did, which are parallel to the shoreline.
Potentially, as my earlier testimony alluded to, 40 foot appears to be the average length of dock in the area. And I don't know if that necessarily means a boardwalk. You could have a boardwalk that has fingers on the side of it that creates a slip.
So 40 foot is the average on the south shoreline?
It's the average of the docks in the slough.
Yeah,
And
this is the issue that I think many of us are having. That is the average. You're right, but the actual navigable channel and the river is not the average. It hugs the south shore of that area. So the average on the south shore of that slough is much shorter. In fact, most of the docks are parallel to the actual shoreline because of the navigable channel. So this average stuff is just, it doesn't make much sense because you're talking about slough length in really shallow water. The reason the other docks are quite a bit longer is because you got to get far enough out to be able to boat to be able to dock your actual boat. These sets of docks are already in deep water because they're in the middle of the navigable river. This average stuff doesn't give me much comfort because I don't think we're taking into consideration what's really happening. And I would prefer you guys take a look at what's happening on the south side of that shore, because this is not the first glance at this. Yes. The reason those condo docks were built the way they were was because the deep water and the river flow in that area. Now, why we're not using that as a precedent here makes me very concerned, because this, again, we should learn from our history in the past here, not do stupid things as they did initially by tearing out all of the foliage. We should really go back and think about this, but the average doesn't give me much comfort here.
I'd like to address that, sir. There are no docks on the southern shoreline of the slough. These would be the first ones. The only dock that is on the southern shoreline would be right when the creek bends, and that is part of the.
That is untrue. There are docks all along the entire condo association on the southern shore of the slough inlet, and so that there's plenty of docks over on that side, and you know that.
Well, if so, once the condos themselves have a community dock system, there's a boardwalk that hugs the shoreline, and then there are finger docks that go out in towards the slough that create slips. The western part of the shoreline, that's why I was saying southern part of the shoreline, where the longer slips are for the Whiskey Jack community, that shoreline faces due west. So I would call that the southwestern shoreline of the slough. Those are 50 feet long. Those fingers are 50 feet long. Where the slough then curves and makes that sharp angle, those fingers are 30 feet long. Across from the wide part, across from the 50-foot section of the Whiskey Jack Apartments, where Nancy and Donald half live, they have a really small little stubby dock that barely juts out there. So that was added into the equation as well. So there are small narrow docks, small short docks that were included at average. And then there are docks like the T docks on the north side that were included at average. So to me, an average doesn't seem like it's that bad of a solution to this problem, because it's taking into account really short docks and long docks. And as far as the southern shoreline you referenced, there's only one dock, and that would be the community dock for the apartments. And their length ranges from 50 feet to 30 feet. So 40 feet is right in between there. That's another average for the southern shoreline.
And I'll just add to that, Mike, that all of the docks at the condo or all of the docks within the slough, none of them cross the channel.
Correct. Just like that, I pointed that out in my hearing statement as well.
Yes. I just want to reiterate that. Thank you so much.
Mr. Grosta, do you have another question or comment?
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, I think we can go ahead and conclude the hearing. I will consider everything that has been said during the hearing, and will issue a preliminary order within 30 days. And of course, the director will either let that become final or make his own final order within 45 days of the hearing date. So my order is just a recommendation. It's not the final order unless the director chooses it to be. So I thank you all for your participation, and I will also consider the written exhibits that everyone submitted as part of this case. And so we'll go ahead and conclude the Zoom call and stop the recording at this point. And folks may sign off as they're able to, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you, Lincoln.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Officer.